All right, welcome to the show. This is Nick Jordan. I'm here with Walter Pinson, our guest. Welcome, Walter.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. All right, so this show is about the future of business, technology, and entrepreneurship, and you've got a couple of decades of experience in all three. So let's start with yourself. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background and what you're working on now?
Yeah, so I'll spare you the long story, but my sort of adventures in technology started, when I was a kid. And I'm old enough, you can't see my gray hair now, but when I was a kid, it really wasn't popular to be, tinkering around with technology. But I actually started writing software when I was 12 years old. Over the course of my, schooling, I've probably touched, nearly, every, sort of like pre-2010 programming language, that exists, along with parallel implementations of some of them. I think I was one of those kids who knew what he wanted to be when he grew up. And I used to collect Byte magazine, or Byte magazines with Bill Gates on the cover and whatnot. That was one of my heroes, and I always wanted to work for Microsoft. And lo and behold, along the way in my journey, I actually ended up there. Background, computer science undergrad, ergo the technology, MBA, grad school, as I started venturing more into building business, because that excites me now just as much as building, technology products. We met Nick around 2012. Nick and I met initially around 2012 when I was working on my third, startup, and our paths crossed again. And so now I'm at Smashing Boxes, where I am Nick's, president and chief operating officer. And we're working on, a number of cool things in the healthcare sector, to the financial sector, to even, logistics management.
Yep. And so there's a lot of technologists. There's a big growth. There's an undersupply of engineers in the world, but you've got a lot of people getting into it now, and they're turning to that as a career. It's sort of like a future of like the workforce. But then you went from that and got into business. So maybe go back and kind of talk about how you went from, writing code and being an engineer to getting not only interested in business, but how you got activated. And then from there, maybe into your kind of first or early entrepreneurial journeys.
Yeah, I think, this is one of those things where I think the seeds were planted in my childhood, from the business perspective. I can remember being, younger than 10 years old, knocking on doors in my community, taking people's trash out for a dime, setting up, a little spot to wash cars for a couple dollars. So I always had an entrepreneurial mindset. Getting older, I didn't have a paper route, but I had a lawnmower and I'd go through the neighborhood and cut grass. So the whole, sort of the idea of like, being an entrepreneur, was sort of like in my DNA before I even knew what an entrepreneur, was. I think, I was certainly a nerdy kid, because, back then to be, dealing with modems and BBS's, bulletin board services, you kind of had to be a nerd. But at the same time, I was a jock because I was in athletics. And I think that gave me a skill set back then that you see more of today, where I could like have one foot in both worlds. And so along my career, being a technologist, I certainly could speak the language of technology, but I could also relate to business people. And quickly in my trajectory, I found myself in that position of lead, in which case I would have to talk to the business representatives about the technology. I'd be the person taking the lead, collecting the requirements and whatnot. So I found a niche in my ability to straddle both worlds. And I think that's kind of like, led me through my journey to where I'm today.
Cool. What was the first business that you started, maybe like post undergrad? And if that was the paper route, that's cool too. But
yeah, no. So it's funny. Actually, I was invited by the George Mason alumni board to come give a talk to undergrad students way back about my journey, and I told this story. My first business was an abysmal failure. I had an idea, but I had I didn't have the correct team to execute on the idea. and I didn't have a network, through which I could sell, right? And so, we just, a couple guys with an idea, and ultimately, it didn't fail. I think the name of it was The Networks, right? A play on words with like networks. My second company, or foray into entrepreneurship, like legitimate entrepreneurship, it was this company called Systems Authority. And I had a great team. I mean, these people knew exactly, what they were doing. They were very capable. And we had a good product idea. But still, I didn't have a deep enough network. And we started this right when the .com bomb, like the whole bottom, the floor fell out of the .com bubble. And so, we were, building, products around directory services and security, and the whole, the floor fell out, and we just found ourselves with no customers. Good product idea, good execution, from the engineering side, but no customers. And my third foray, it really wasn't a startup, so to speak, but it was a boutique systems integrator. And me and a buddy of mine, when we left Microsoft, we started this company called Pinson 3 Systems. And we were doing government subcontracting, and we were also serving nonprofits and startups. And we found a niche in the intelligence sector, and we were doing some really cool things, to help on the war on terror and other things. And so, that was the culmination of me having a good team, having good services, well-crafted services, and a network, through which I could sell and take these services to market.
Yep. So you've got a very, diverse skill set, and a lot of experiences. And I guess one of the things I wanted to, extract out of your brain and like life is, well, I'm trying to lead us there, but the thing that pops out to me is, technologists becoming more strategic and ingrained into more of the business process. And, and how has that aided and added to your sort of career and the adventure you've been on?
Yeah, I think, what it did was put me, in a place of I got to be in front of business leaders who weren't necessarily technologists, but knew that they needed technology. And so my business acumen at a young age got me a seat at the table. Let's put it that way. And I was savvy enough to leverage that, in my own advancement. I do, give credit to Microsoft. That was I was able to get in there, obviously, on my own, merits or whatever, and based on my experiences and what I was bringing to the table. But they have a really thorough training program for technology strategists. And I went, through, that Microsoft program, and became, a technology strategist, for major accounts. I mean, like double-digit $1 million, accounts, and Fortune 50 companies, and that sort of basically like it was I'm trying to think of an analogy. When we send a ship to Jupiter, we just don't go straight to Jupiter. We hit Mars and slingshot around, use Mars for gravity, whatever. But that sort of slingshotted me, basically on the course of the rest of my journey.
Cool. So, on the individual level, would you constitute that as career advice, in terms of, broadening one's skill set adds flavor and adds extra value, which will pay off in the long run?
Yeah. So back then, not that it was a unicorn, but it was rare to find people, with both, business acumen as well as like deep technology skills. I think today it's table stakes. I think it's expected, that, I don't know that there are too many jobs, and I could be wrong, but I don't know that there's too much advancement, unless you're like, really unique, to be the type of engineer that you just want to sit in a corner and never interact with other humans and code your heart away. The reason being is because of globalization, I think. Once we sort of like opened up borders, and we started, basically there's competition in the labor market, right? There are policies in the US and around the globe where now, globalization, it doesn't just impact steel workers, it impacts, technologists and the sort of, information, workers, if you will. And I think these days, in order to differentiate yourself and in order to excel, in your career, you actually have to bring yourself up the value chain. And in order to do that, you need to have that business skill set along with your technology skill set, because there's plenty of technologists all over the globe in far off lands, that can do the same thing you can do if that's all you can do.
Yeah. And I didn't want to steal my own thunder, but I'm just going to, because we both read a book, your recommendation called The Challenger Sales Model, or Challenger Sales. And which, again, we just talked about entrepreneur technologists. We'll later talk about kind of learning and getting into blockchain through, some education at MIT, but now you're reading about sales. So you're still, trying to add to your skill set, found a good book, shared it. I always love a good business book. I haven't read I haven't read something fiction and maybe since, I'm trying to think of what I read in 8th grade English, but
Wow.
Yeah, so maybe that's not true. Well, it's probably true. The Dan Brown books, I think I did read those, but everybody did. So that's about not being a commodity and not being an order taker. So they're talking to salespeople, but then at the very last part of the book, spoiler alert, they're like, well, guess what? We also have run the similar experiences for people in HR, for people in engineering. And they also told a story of this guy who was at their conference, who was running the sales organization at some company. And he was like, wow, this tells the story of my whole career. And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, I started in, engineering, and I moved kind of over to IT. And I was really trying to, convey to my colleagues, like, we can't be order takers. We have to show the strategic value to the business stakeholders so that, they trust us and they empower us to make better decisions. And now then he moved on to marketing, and now he was running sales. And so the not being an order taker piece, was something that resonated. And, you just read this book now. So obviously you knew something about that a long time ago, to where you're like, I want to use these skills and position them strategically, because everyone can go sit in a corner and do their job. But that means that person who hired you knows exactly what they want and knows that they're going to tell you what to do, and they're going to hope that you're going to do it. And the book, spoiler, one is better suited as an individual, organization, entity, whatever, to actually offer new value, and value that maybe was not seen before, in a way that, endears them and makes them a trusted advisor. So on a personal level, it sounds like you did that. So that's awesome. Moving on. Yeah,
well,
go ahead. Speak to that.
Before we move on, it's interesting, and it was also interesting when I read that passage. But as you bring it up, when I was much younger, I had a friend of mine. We graduated high school together. She went to Virginia Tech. I won't call her name here, but she ended up getting a degree in hospitality services and started working for hotels, like big box hotels. And I tracked her career, and I found it odd. I didn't quite understand it then, my younger age, that, they had her working front desk, they had her working food and beverage, they had her working housekeeping. And I'm like, why would you go from where you were to housekeeping? Eventually she went to HR. What they were doing was getting her to master every aspect of that business, right? So that at some point, she could become, a leader of the business, right? It'd be hard to really squeeze out, all of the efficiency and productivity you need out of your employees to deliver the best value to your customers if you don't understand, certain aspects of the business. And I, once I got older, then I realized, okay, that's very smart. She can run hotels with her eyes closed because she's managed each aspect, of the hotel business. And I think, getting back to that story, in the Challenger Sale book that you were mentioning, that's the type of thing that, you might not run every aspect of the type of business, that you're in, but when you can, step outside of your box and get a, deeper understanding, say of sales, of operations, of IT, of HR, even if it's all from a technology perspective, that makes you, better able to, not only to just rise up through management, but able to execute, when you get in those positions.
Yep. And before, going into business, I think, you've got a really inspiring story and journey with all these different experiences that a lot of people don't have. I didn't get all this different kind of training. I don't have a lot of big box experience or sort of the breadth and depth. I've kind of been just using my sort of same skill over and over and over. You then went and got so you know all this stuff, right? You're an expert, you're at a large company doing solutions, engineering, and then you've started your own business, but then recently you decided to then you got your business degree. But then you're like, well, hold on, what made you go back and get further more tools, more learning? Tell me about like, what'd you do, why, and kind of how's that, relevant now?
Yeah. So for sure, I'll start this story off with, I actually love learning. And, I often tell people like, if I, was just, wealthy beyond my imagination, I'd probably, be a student for the rest of my life. Cause I just, I just like, I just love, knowledge. When I have the time, one of the things I like to study is finance, in the history, of finance. And that's just an obscure thing. But, there is it's a scary thing, for somebody who is a deep technologist to venture into business because, there's a certain, I don't want to call it security blanket, but if you are a good technologist, there's always work somewhere, right? And if you start venturing into other areas, then the concern is perhaps those skills will dull, and then you're in this sort of like danger zone or whatever. There's value in being super deep, right? Like I've researched and studied people who've done one thing their entire life, and they spent thousands of hours, if not 100,000 plus hours, on that one thing, and they're the foremost expert, and they will always be valuable to society as a result of that. Then there are people who are more broad, and they're less deep, right? Or they might be deep in one thing and they're very broad. That is potentially more risky, or it's potentially more rewarding. From my perspective, if I ever feel myself, if I feel my knives getting dull, or I feel like I'm not being challenged enough or whatever, I try to, either find new knives or sharpen my existing knives. I also try to read the tea leaves, and make sure that I'm riding the next wave, that's coming. And I recognized, a while back, like I made a mistake because people tried to get me into cryptocurrencies and such back in 2012. That's the first time I heard of Bitcoin. And some buddies of mine, got me to download, this tool to mine crypto. And I did it, and I thought it was kind of quirky. I really didn't, recognize like sort of like the value of it and where it was going until, 2014, 2015. And so, but beyond just the crypto itself, it was blockchain as a technology. And so, I started, doing a little bit of research and decided, what, blockchain is going to be, the next big thing. I would later learn this term called GPT, or general purpose technology. Electricity is a general purpose technology. The internet is a general purpose technology. It's something that, provides leverage and can invent entire new industries around it. And so, I wanted to go all in on blockchain, once I recognized, basically, what it is. And so, I recently, did some executive education at MIT to sort of like explore that, and, and innovation in general, to just sharpen those knives.
Yep. So and as I've thought about this interview, there's definitely, much more to share than just the outcome, like kind of the journey. So, one road for success for folks to be inspired by is, have lots of skills, but don't, rest on your laurels, broaden your skill set, be more than an order taker, be strategic. And then also don't stop pursuit of new knowledge, because, like if you just stay the same, you're ultimately going to move into the atrophying state. Okay, cool. So that's great. So thanks for sharing. I knew all that obviously, but I think, hearing it, other people, that's, it's impressive. It's inspiring. So what about, and then I think about thinking about the book, and it's about, becoming more strategic. And you have been in the professional services world and selling and engineering solutions, which are more than just a product. It's also the solution and the outcome, for also maybe 2 decades. I mean, I'm pretty sure, some of the original kind of core engineering roles you took on at Microsoft, one of the biggest, most successful kind of companies, the original big tech, I guess, the OG, well, maybe them, Oracle, whatever, but, helping implement large scale solutions. So you're doing professional services. You've done that at Pinson 3 Systems. You've done that at other places, now leading Smashing Boxes. That role, I mean, I've seen how that role has evolved. How do you see the role now, kind of equating it to the personal journey, but how do you see the role of like professional services in business, evolving?
Yeah, I think it's getting, it's on the one hand, it's kind of staying the same. On the other hand, it's getting a little bit more complex because the world is getting more complex, and the various technologies are getting more complex. I'll use the analogy though, that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Blockchain for sure is definitely a new technology, because it's cryptographically based. I mean, it's complicated. It's not something that I'm going to get my grandmother to do, right? Like, she's not going to understand, private keys and such. So it's not something that's simple. But for technologists, and for people who I talk to that are a little bit intimidated, by this, I try to let them understand, like, a blockchain is really just a database, right? Like, I mean, it's, in the grand scheme of things, if you know what a database is, then you should be able to wrap your mind, around blockchain. And I know I'm getting off topic, but it's a database. You hear this term smart contracts. Well, those are just like stored procedures in a database, right? So it's analogous to existing technology. It's just new and different, and it has a different set of capabilities. I say all that to say, like, problems that customers have, there are patterns, in business, for business problems that are recurring, right? And business needs to solve these problems, and they come to consulting companies to help solve those problems. And so, from a professional services perspective, the cool thing about professional services is you get to work with, a bunch of different industries, and you get to work with a bunch of different companies in the same industry. So you start seeing the same patterns within industries, and you see certain patterns that cross industries, and you can bring best practices for solving those problems to your clients. So from that perspective, it's the same. The thing that's changing, that's much more difficult, is that in order to add value for your clients, you really have to be, I don't want to say smarter, you have to be smarter in your lane, smarter in your domain, which in our case is, software development, right? Product development. You have to be smarter about that than your customers. And so, because these new technologies are coming out at such a rapid pace, like the I forgot the IBM executive's name, that came up with the rule, like, technology like sort of doubles every 18 months. Like, it's even more rapid than that now. And so from a professional services perspective, there's so much more, right? The breadth of what you have to be smart on is so much more than what it used to be. So that's where the difficulty lies. Same game, just the volume of information, the volume of knowledge that you need to bring to the table is just greater, in my opinion.
Is that Moore's law, or is that just a whole
Moore's law? Thank you. I'm sorry.
I had I was not connecting the dots. I was like, he was from IBM. I thought he was from like, I thought he was friends with Aristotle or something, Like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
What century is Moore?
Yeah, I think it's from Intel, I think, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's like speed of computing or something doubles every 1 or 2 years, which, I mean, New Year's resolution, if you do 1% gain, I'll botch it, per day, then you're up by 300x by the end of the year or something like that.
Wow.
That's also compounding interest, I guess, on your gains.
No
That's cool. And I so I love professional services. I think, it's gives you, like it allows for pattern recognition. It allows for any individual client or partner to receive a large collection, like the collective of all that kind of, collection of ideas, patterns, problem statements, and then expertise. And there's always a world where, strategic expertise is valuable in small doses. And for this, this isn't about the future of professional services, but it's kind of like in terms of the future of business. And I go back to this one podcast I listened to like 4 or 5 or 6 years ago from Reid Hoffman, where he was like, if we all do work on the same problem, instead of we all work on our different little companies, we could probably actually achieve something greater. And I was like,
Right.
huh, that's really interesting. And as like a sort of entrepreneur and consultant and businessy kind of person, I've never thought about like, let's all just like join forces and do one thing, which maybe, at a big picture, if we had that chance, I would absolutely do it. But on a smaller scale, that's like, I want to work on one problem for a long, long time, as opposed to I want to like work on my skills and myself so that I can apply that to many problems, in sequential order and rapid succession. That's like the difference of, an entrepreneur or consultant versus, I want to be on one thing and one track, or the 10,000, the Kobe Bryant, right? 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
What's your take on that, right? You've kind of done both. You've had product-based startups where you've been solving one problem. You've then, spread out and looked at, patterns across many and found ways that there's value to cut across all that. But how do you kind of see that, go deep on one versus in the enjoyment and the value that you gain and you're able to give through looking at many?
Yeah, no, I think, it's different strokes for different folks. And this is from a personal career perspective, right? Some people, tend to get bored if they do one thing, over and over again. Whereas, doing that one thing over and over again would make you, an expert or foremost expert, in the field, years down the road. Having that breadth, having seen so many different things, that also makes you valuable, in a different way. From a business perspective, or just, reflecting back on my own career, I wouldn't change a thing, right? So I probably spent half my career in professional services, and half my career, in the product space. And both experiences were, immensely enjoyable, rewarding, and offered me, opportunities for growth. And so, because that was my path and because I enjoyed it so much, I highly recommend it, for anyone. I think, where we stand, and just like, reflecting on smashing boxes, we are in a unique position, to bring high levels of innovation, to companies that might not otherwise be able to afford it, because, based on our team, and just based on our company and our client portfolio over the years, we've got the ability to bring economies of scale and scope, to a certain segment of the market, that perhaps wouldn't otherwise, have the benefit of that. And so, I think that's exciting. Generally speaking, I think we see, in the marketplace, this tendency, there's a lot of, sort of aggregation, right? Like, Googles of the world, Facebooks of the world, they're trying to acquire everything in sight. But I think, given the political winds, we might be at a turning point where maybe that's frowned upon. And so maybe there's room, for, diffusion, right? That's the opposite of sort of that focus that you were mentioning before would be diffuse, right? Like if the markets were more diffuse, and there's pros and cons to each for sure, because certainly with a Google, you get, economies of scale and scope, with an organization of that magnitude. But, some might say that, well, you probably don't get, as much choice as you might otherwise have, if there weren't so much focus. So,
Yep. And so I'm going to try to have this nice little story arc, and we'll see after we finish this conversation. But the spirit of this kind of interview series podcast is just knowledge sharing, right? We can't, we can have a kind of almost the equivalent of a one-to-one of impact by doing a panel or talking to a classroom, but having some of these experience shares and putting on the internet is supposed to be like a one-to-many. And now we're living, this is January 2021, which, for all our future listeners, might date this, but, kind of in a COVID time. So, this is one of the better, opportunities to get some of these conversations out there and let people experience different folks that they might not know. And so I think you did a great job, and it's got a very inspiring personal story on just how you kind of came to be. So sometimes the future is the future, and it's like sort of like this nebulous statement. And then sometimes the future is now, right? So we've been accelerated into this kind of new mode, and we've had to force and react. And you are, in a small business, a tech company, and you're in leadership. So, talk about leadership in a time of rapid change, and you tailor that to specifically COVID if you want, or just talk about what it's been like. Share your experience being a leader and some of the struggles you've had to deal with and the challenges you've had to overcome, given the circumstances.
For sure. Certainly, and my story, sort of overlaps with yours in that regard. But uncertainty, it can be a bear to deal with, and not everybody's built for that. And so, certainly when you're in leadership, and there's uncertainty, at the scale, like we're in uncharted territory. I think the scale of uncertainty is, it's global, like it's beyond national, it's global. And you have a business, it's global. Our supply chain is global. Our customer base, is global. And so, there's certainly, going to be an impact. So, if everybody's, sitting on the sidelines or sitting on cash, that certainly, has an impact. And as a leader, of a small business, right? Small business is much different than large business, sort of like the corporate environment, in a number of areas. But one of those areas is that, you look all of your people in the eye on a daily basis. And that, the business, that you, Nick, founded, supports multiple families, right? I mean, there are people, who depend on that business. And so, we all enjoy working together, and we all enjoy creating together, and we all enjoy, adding value to our clients together. But when you have this level of uncertainty, it's scary, for the business. And I think, all of our leadership, you, me, the rest of our senior leadership team, I think we've demonstrated, a certain amount of intestinal fortitude, that you need, in order to survive, in this environment. And I think, one of the things that I love about our team, though, is that, we don't even have to say it, like the way we just operate inherently. And I think it's a testament to how well we put the team together, that, there's just no I in team. And so, I've been, certainly, battling, the challenges, of COVID, but the team has been receptive, and the team is certainly, battling right there with us. So it's like, none of us are fighting this battle alone. We're still, client focused, doing great work for our clients every day. I feel really good, moving into 2021. It feels like we're turning the corner, and there's still uncertainty. But I think, with the vaccine, being disseminated, that, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so business prospects are looking up.
Yeah. And like, speaking of looking people in the Zoom eye, how, I don't even know if that's a term, but it should be. But, how's that kind of changed, right? I mean, it's the kind of a lot less, true interpersonal kind of contact, from a kind of team and culture building perspective.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I love about, being a smashing boxer is, we have this beautiful office space, right? So I really miss our office, and I really miss, the vibe that we were able to create, in the office, and having that, person to person, interaction, in person. But, one of the things that we, sort of like recognized early on, and I think this is, it's certainly because, we were always set up, for remote and mobile, if need be. Not that we, plan to be like a remote workforce, but we just leverage all of the latest and greatest technologies to get our job, done. And so, our transition from in the office to remote was quite painless. And based on what I've read, across the industry, we were, a lot like a lot of other companies where, we saw productivity uptick, shortly after, going remote, and, we were in a position where, we were reminding people to, make sure to take some time, right, so that people didn't burn themselves out. But our culture is it continued. So one of the things that we do at Smashing Boxes is we like to give our colleagues their flowers while they can still smell them. And so every Friday we have a company-wide stand-up, where one of the rituals, in our stand-up meeting, is to give shout outs, which is where we give props to, our colleagues who, done, they did something, or achieved something that was commendable, or provided support in some type of way that, we appreciated. And so, kind of like the Knights of the Round Table, we stand in a circle, and we have that conversation, and things like that, right? I think our culture is strong, and that culture translated to this remote workforce, right? So we have these stand-ups via Zoom, every Friday, and we still, give these shout outs and let people know, that we appreciate them, and highlight them when they do something that's noteworthy.
Yeah. Are there any other like kind of culture building activities that you can think of that were implemented, either carried over from prior to COVID or implemented post COVID that you think would be good, so that I can make a listicle saying 3 things people should know about building culture in a time of COVID? I've got a couple already, but maybe one more would be sweet.
Yeah, no, that carryover, I think that's one of the biggest ones. I think another thing, and I have to, give props to Rachel, who's our VP of People and Business Ops. Not only, do we, do this sort of activity where we give everybody props, but we actually started having thematic meetings, and that's sort of fun, right? So instead of like just another boring Zoom meeting, we might all dress up like pirates, like, one day, or things like that. And that might sound silly, but it's actually like fun. And it's sort of like, eliminates the monotony, or gives you a break, in the monotony. And that's good for the culture. And we also, do things, where we have meetings where we appoint someone, of the group, to ask a provocative question, or a silly question. And each one of us, on that meeting, has to answer the question. And what that does is give an opportunity for people to share, and it gives the rest of the team the opportunity to learn more about their colleagues that they work with. And it humanizes, your coworkers in a very real way. And that creates even stronger bonds than what you may have already had. So, we do things like that to keep basically replace that culture building that might happen at the water cooler one-on-one. We kind of do that, via the group now.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. There's definitely some good takeaways there for how to continue to build culture and resilience, and why that's important in a time where we're all like forcibly remote. And I've had plenty of like really great meetings and fun convos, and through doing this kind of series, connecting with people. And sometimes in other ways, sometimes just like, oh, the kids are down, like, let's just jump on the phone or something. Or I mean, I've called like my dad a lot more, it's sort of like, hey man, let's just like shoot the shit. Like in person, it was a big barrier. I was like, oh man, I'm not calling this guy. Like, I'll just drive down there at one point. But there is kind of that, like, I don't even know if we'll like recognize the feeling of like actually getting endorphins from like, an in-person like meeting and interaction. And like, will we ever high five again? I mean, I know we've talked about there should be no handshake, but it's like, will you just be like, yes, give me some freaking dap? Like, that was awesome. And like, feel like that real vibe. There's still a computer barrier, and then you turn it off and you're like, my desk, so I don't know. Anyways, that'll be fun to kind of get back. So it's 2021, obviously, through your kind of leadership experience, it's uncertainty, it's adjustment, it's sort of, installing more things to build resilience. But, now it is time to turn the corner, kind of for the world. It's been time, but especially now it feels like it really is the time. Like the news is coming out even in December about, vaccines, and it doesn't matter if it's now and it's ready to go. We're still needing to be, have the right kind of precautions and not get ahead of our skis. But let's kind of turn to like, sort of the arc, right? So now it's businesses are turning the corner, you're investing, we're investing, we're all thinking about what can we do now to be not just like, oh, yay, we made it. And now it's day one of we made it. It's like, no, let's not be there. Let's be ahead. Personally, it's like, I want to be in shape, and I want to like have a family budget, and I want to have better like routines around eating with the kids so that we all go to bed earlier. Right. Cause it's like, we have to do it anyway. So if we can start to use this time to improve when the world goes back to normal and there's travel and there's this, that, and the other, like hopefully we'll have a more kind of solid base. I'd love to have you not speak about that because you have so many more better and more sophisticated ideas about businesses, but like think about companies. What, like in terms of your experience, what are you doing? What can other businesses be doing? So that we're not only, we didn't only survive, we're setting ourselves up for thriving.
Yeah, I think the way I feel about that is, without necessarily looking inward, when I look outward, the question that our customers or prospective customers have to ask is, what do I need to be doing? What does my organization need to be doing to thrive in this new post-COVID era? I told you this story already, but I'm going to say it again for the viewers.
Viewer, singular usually. So
that's fine. No, I had an interesting, I had a very interesting, sort of interaction, with the lawn guy, and to figure out like who I want to do landscaping services or who I wanted to use for landscaping services. There's like the big companies, I could have went that route, but there's like this little like mom and pop type situation. And so I'm going to patronize a small business. And that normally was a cash business. But once COVID hit, we have to social distance. We need to, not get close to people. We need to stay 6 feet away, things like that. But even the smallest business, right? Even the sole proprietorship still needs to get paid. And so, we started interacting via Cash App. Sometimes I wouldn't even go outside my house. There'd be text messages to coordinate like which services were going to be done this particular visit, and then Cash App to actually make that payment, right? That sole proprietorship, which was basically a cash and carry business, right? Face-to-face and cash and carry is now a technology company, right? I mean, they still do landscaping services, right? But it's a technology company. It actually leverages and requires technology in order to continue to do business in the post-COVID era. If he did not have that capability, I'm not sure that his business could survive because people are going to start dealing with companies, that can, do contactless services, if you will. And so, that's just a really simple, sort of example of how COVID has impacted even the smallest business. And so when we think about like larger organizations, like what do they need to be doing to thrive? And I think, one of the things that, that we're thinking about is, how do we make our customers better? How do we make our customers, either able to continue to operate, at the levels that they're used to operating pre-COVID, or how do we find new revenue streams for those customers? What opportunities exist, and that sort of thing. I think we all need to be thinking about that, now, because things are different, and even though if you read the papers, I think by March between March and October of last year, I think an analysis of Yelp found that like 800,000 or so businesses that were listed on Yelp had shuttered for good. They were like closed for good, right? And the companies that have survived that, not to say that you should pat yourself on the back, but that's certainly an accomplishment. But what do you need to do now to thrive, like in this situation? And so that's what I think about every day.
Yep. Yeah, I think I guess there is that separate group of, okay, you didn't survive. How, maybe there's a future story of reinvention, but I was thinking really about what you just said, like even that lawn care guy, like, all right, you did that. You've adopted tools and services. You've survived. Many companies, go remote, do different things, keep your customers, like extend payment terms, whatever. Even big companies headquartered here, Lenovo or whatever, like obviously they survive, tap into public markets, whatever. But then how do you gear up to thrive? And not that there's an answer, it's not like a single answer, but I kind of want to tee up something that I know you've been working on, which is around the idea of like, let's just get kind of the best kind of experts in the room, and let's think about it together. Let's not just think about solving problems you know you have. Let's think about what problems you don't know you have. And what I mean by getting experts in the room, it's, this is where we also like to come in. This is something I like to do, right? It's just sort of collaborate, get smart people together, and see what comes out. You've built a product. Well, I'd say a product, but it's a productized service that you just launched, kind of, which I feel like is aimed at this exact thing, which is you've survived. Now it's time to think strategically about how to thrive. We're not saying we know your answer. What we're saying is, we want to help solve it, and coming from one perspective. So I'm aware of what you've kind of been working on, and I think it's valuable for others to kind of hear about that too. So why don't you give your elevator pitch there?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the tee up. So, experiences, like the one I just described, along with some past experiences, just caused me to reflect on, there's a certain segment of the market that they know, I think at this point, to steal, I forgot, was it Nixon? We're all technology companies now, right? Like, I mean, that's a truism right now. Like, because of COVID, we are all technology companies now, but not every company out there is equipped, either from a staff perspective, or just from a scope of knowledge perspective. They're not necessarily equipped to manage the technology to maximal effect. And so we conceive, of this service called Cio Advisor, where we actually can bring, an individual or team of individuals to bear to serve as a chief information officer for companies, that either didn't think they need one, or maybe thought they might need one but couldn't afford one. So we made it economical to have a chief information officer. We just, took a fractional model. So people may be familiar with NetJets, or timeshares for that matter. It's where you buy a slice of a resource and leverage it, as much as you need it, and you only pay for what you need. And that's what we're doing with Cio Advisor. But the idea is that, for the leadership of small, mid-sized enterprises, that don't have a chief information officer, or maybe they do, but they, would they'd be able to improve their performance if they had, executive thought leadership surrounding their existing CIO. We can bring, that insight, that innovation to bear, to look at the resources that are contained in that company, and figure out, either how to use them, more efficiently to create more value for their customers, or how to use resources in a way that creates new value, new revenue opportunities, et cetera. It seems to be, getting well received in the marketplace. Look forward to increasing our client portfolio in 2021.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard to be like, don't just survive, thrive, because many businesses didn't. Many humans didn't, but we're going to kind of keep it on business and not be too down in the dumps there. But there's something to that, I get kind of excited about as well, which is each and everything, because there's sort of like the future of, healthcare is like, there's no walls, right? Everyone knows everything at all times. It's just like this like matrix level of data that just kind of comes from you to someone else, and they process it back to you, and then two little supplements get inserted, right? So, there's some things that are like theoretical, and then there's kind of this, which is like, it's strategic, but it's also tactical. It's like, tactically, we can't say this is where my industry is going, this is where my business should go, but we can say like, each one of our resources needs to be allocated in the most strategic way possible and optimized in the most strategic way possible. And so, when I kind of hear what you're talking about, it's like, one of the biggest, it's not, how does, again, this goes back to the book too. Like, if you're spending money on technology and products and platforms, how can that not be an expense? How can that be an investment? And an investment makes ROI, whether it's, return on effort, or it actually makes money. If you're buying something and you can actually productize it yourself, now you can build IP, you can build institutional value. Maybe there's this big macro world where if everybody goes to thrive mode, the resources or wealth or jobs or whatever that are created are enough to sort of offset, kind of what was lost. All those new businesses open back up because there's that many more people going out to lunch, or this business closed, but all the workers could benefit from, additional employment opportunities. I mean, that's kind of going, maybe tying some individual things into too big of a weaving too big of a web there. But I think that's, we do want, if you're set up and you can thrive and you're thinking about it, please do, please like rise the, build the economy, build the, build the rebound for us all. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, and us being, a pure technology company, just, a group of guys and gals that have their heads down and can write code, that is not, who we are. We, have, built a team of, really savvy product people, people with strategic thinking, strategic backgrounds, as well as people who are hardcore technologists, who over their careers have leveraged technology to increase business value, at various, companies in their past. So, from this perspective, and again, like, there's many sort of dimensions to this, but if we're, strictly looking at the post-COVID impact, every business leader should understand what the drivers are for their business. There's certain variables in your business, certain levers that you can pull that would, increase your revenue, for instance, right? Maximize like the yield or the return on your investment, your company's investment. One of the things that we have to do is, look at the drivers, for that business. Which things did COVID impact? There, perhaps in your business, the more face-to-face meetings, that you were able to produce out of your sales organization, the greater your revenue would be. Well, if you can't have face-to-face meetings anymore, due to COVID, that's one driver that's been impacted. Well, what within your organization and what without your organization can be brought to bear to help, basically mitigate that, or mitigate the loss of the ability to do face-to-face meetings, or actually accelerate, right? And so, and that's just one example, but like there are many different things, even indirectly, that are like super subtle, that COVID's impacted that, we don't even think about. But the idea is, if you have the ability to bring, 4 smart brains, into the room, that might not have the same blinders, that you would have, because, most of the time people who know their business, they shy away from asking quote unquote stupid questions. But the benefit from people who might come from a different perspective is they probably won't be shy about asking the stupid questions. And oftentimes those stupid questions are the little seedlings that spawn and spur innovation. I lost your video. I mean, your audio.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just didn't want you to hear me chugging that coffee. New Year's resolution starting week 2, less coffee. But you can't start like a clean eating program and not like supplement that with lots of caffeine to make up for all of the lost like energy and great delicious grease and carbs.
And the appetite suppression.
Oh, I know, need it. So that's great. And I think, so actually, maybe switch gears and talk kind of layer it into something that's blockchain related, right? So, I mean, it's a protocol, it's a general purpose technology. And this is this doesn't have to be like a 101 type thing, make it as, sophisticated or simple as possible, but businesses who are, companies, small businesses would have just heard like, all right, good advice. We have survived, or we see the end. We can't just be like, okay, we're there now, just start like sprinting and then we're going to run out of gas and then like, not make it. So let's still pace ourselves. Let's get to the end, but let's start to gear up and get ready for what does business look like? We already, metaphorically adopted the Cash App, but now what does the future really look like? Is it just that? Is it just the Cash App? Or do I need to be continuing to, retool and reevaluate my resource kind of allocation so that I'm better positioned? And this is like kind of from a generalist perspective. But if someone's like, okay, cool, I know I need to do something. I'm curious about certain things. And I'm hearing this guy talk about blockchain. Is there something that you're like, well, this is why that's important for this kind of industry. And here's how, folks could be possibly thinking about that. Obviously that's a kind of a wide array, but go for it.
Yeah, sure. One thing that comes to mind is something that we talked about like a while ago, like the local co-ops. I know at one point were struggling to sort of adapt to COVID, co-op grocery stores and things of that nature. And communities, they those things are cherished, right? I mean, you have your big box grocery stores or whatever, but when there's these small co-ops or these small mom and pop grocers, like those are like, community icons or community pillars. People don't want those things to go away. And they were struggling during COVID because, either one, they couldn't afford the investment in all of like the personal protection equipment, or the sort of like regulations were shifting and things like that. Um, uh, but often sort of like the root cause, or the reason why sort of like a big chain like your big Harris Teeters of the world, or Wegmans, they have the money to just write checks and put solutions in place to sort of accommodate the new regulatory regime or what have you. Whereas some of these small grocers, they just don't have the financial wherewithal to afford that. So this is one of those things where consortium, right? Like, I can imagine a world where these small mom and pops, they still operate independently, but they collaborate with one another, pool resources, as a consortia, and blockchain can be leveraged to basically, sort of like keep everybody honest in terms of their shared resource and pooling and the distribution, of those resources. Also, certain technologies that are backed by blockchain could be brought to bear in terms of, managing how people make purchases. There could be, sort of, I imagine, and I've already sort of like thought through some of these things where there are point of sale systems that, require not much more than scanning, barcodes or QR codes, and have the digital payment automatically take place, on the phone, not necessarily requiring a cashier to sort of like process those things, or have your staff more focused on packaging, those orders and putting those orders in place, and having sort of that blockchain technology. Again, oftentimes QR codes and blockchain go hand in hand in terms of the ability to track orders, but have people walk through the door, scan something, and know what your bag of groceries are versus someone else's. Now, there are a lot of these sort of like grocery delivery, sort of apparatuses in place, and that can be handy too. But sometimes I know like in downtown, the downtown restaurants, excuse me, when COVID first hit, when they first were able to open back up, there'd be situations where, you ordered your food for pickup and you walked in, there were no humans in sight. There were just bags on the table, and you identify your bag and you pick it up. But certainly the ability to let, small businesses pool resources together in a trustless network, leveraging blockchain to create that trustless network. That's just one, idea of how that might work. And there are a bunch of them, but that's just one that's top of mind.
Yeah, that's what came to mind too, like trust, removing the need for extra trust, either from entity to entity, person to entity, or otherwise. I mean, obviously with political wins, it's like, oh, no one trusts anyone. So I think that's where my mind goes to at first. But yeah, so if you're a small business in that case, do you have to get together with other small businesses and say, hey, let's kind of pool together and create this blockchain solution? Or do you know of any products or services that are already out there? Or is each install kind of unique on its own?
Yeah, I don't know offhand a product or service that already does that. I'd be surprised if somebody's not working on that already, especially considering, you know, stories about, the local and small grocers, those were in the news pretty heavy, at the beginning. Um, One thing I will say is that, no technology, no technology is a silver bullet typically, right? Like, there's what the people, process, and technology. And so, normally it's, some form of all three of those that need to be, brought together to really, create solutions, to our problems. That's a good niche, or one of the sort of like values that entrepreneurs add to society, is sometimes they take on the burden of creating these things so that your small grocers wouldn't have to manage this themselves. They would have to create their own consortia. There'd be a startup that would have, a service that they offered, which basically, added each individual like small grocer to a consortia, and basically alleviate them, from the heavy lifting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that most of these probably do kind of come back to all three of the people, process, technology kind of trifecta, as opposed to just the tech. But I mean, I was just sort of like freeform asking, because I was thinking that too. I was like, all right, so, how can companies think about, blockchain, which is not the, you don't just throw it at a problem, but to build either strategic value for their institution long term, or for, even if it's like resilience planning, like, obviously, like, we've all got resources, we've all got just different like units of stuff, right? And like, we now want to trade said units for said resources in a variety of ways, and removing steps, removing inefficiencies is kind of what technology does. I'm just like kind of thinking out loud. I was like, well, I mean, obviously there's like supply chain issues and scares, like, oh, I won't get something. Like, would the world be a better place if we all had a lot of these supply chains on the blockchain, so people could know, and buy something all the way, they could go all the way to the, cow, and make sure they got milk. And therefore, like, when that kind of hit all that places, it was already allocated to them. I mean, I don't know if that just pushes the pandemonium further up, or if it actually creates more visibility and transparency to, to nip that in the bud, per se. And I don't know if that's even one business's problem to solve, or if that's just like an opportunity. So I'm just kind of like brainstorming, but it feels like it could be a part of people's arsenal as they think about going forward and thriving.
Yeah, no, that very thing that you just mentioned, I attended this webinar, and I think the host of the webinar, it was a combination of FedEx. There were executives from FedEx, and executives from, I think, Thermo Fisher Scientific, and a few other companies. And this was like right in the heat of COVID. And they were talking about the supply chain issues they were having, in order to, they were struggling providing PPE, and other, sort of like, healthcare, life science related, supplies around the globe. And, one of the listeners, not one of the presenters, one of the listeners brought up the fact that there were certain ports in China that were, that were bottlenecking things, and that was a huge problem that was having like downstream negative impact, to their business, and so they were talking about, brainstorming solutions to that, because I think at some point in the chain you could actually choose your port, right? And so they were talking about kind of like an IoT type situation, where either the packages or the supplies themselves, as they move through the chain, would report how long they actually were located at a particular place, so that you can understand like which were where you can understand where the bottlenecks were, and reroute the rest of your supplies in real time in response to that. So kind of like a Waze, but for supply chain, right? So you see where the logjam is, you reroute your supplies through the supply chain away from the logjam, so that you ultimately can, because that has a negative impact on production down the line. Once those supplies get to where they need to be, then those things either find themselves in some manufacturing process or something else to create products that then end up going to customers. So that is a unique area where blockchain, I think, can be brought to bear. Keeping and tracking that data, where again, trustless network. No one owns all of these individual ports necessarily. They're international. They're all over the globe. But if each are reporting their information into this distributed trust network, people can build applications on top of that data to do all manner of things that would add value to the supply chain.
Yep. Well, I also quickly, it made me think about like, and I don't know where the opportunity is here, but integrations and interoperability. So like, physically in the supply chain, things can stop somewhere, but think about just like the flow of information and more of a technology world, it's usually like this, the flow of information stops at like an API or an integration. And like in healthcare, I'm not sure how big this word is still, but interoperability was always a big thing. Like, oh, these systems aren't interoperable, meaning it's like, I'm going to drive my truck, my pallet to this one place, unpack it, and then have a human walk it each box across the street and then load it into another truck, as opposed to having that truck just go load right onto the train, go load right onto the freight, go over to the other thing. Those systems aren't talking. It's like they're bottlenecked every single place. Or someone can actually go take each t-shirt out of each box, repackage it. I mean, whatever, you can take that metaphor as far as you want, but it may be even internal, right? So in-house, if some company's got a lot of systems, maybe they just build their own system, their glue app. But I feel like, is blockchain a way for a lot of these things to like speak together and like create sort of, easy layers of interoperability, because of its sort of ability to be kind of a database and be sort of an immutable record. Just wondering if that's a way for efficiencies inside, intra-org, as opposed to something that's like more of a product that multiple organizations plug into.
Yeah, no, that's something that I think is explored less, but it should be explored more, right? And so, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, SOA, SOA, service-oriented architecture, that was like all the rage. And, we used to talk about like big SOA and little SOA, where big SOA was, across, multiple companies. Where, think of like a company like Boeing and all of their suppliers, right? They would have like services, these, like APIs and such, that would be leveraged, externally with all their suppliers. And then little SOA would be like, inside your individual applications or whatever. And now we're into this sort of like, microservices sort of mode, now. I think, most people are thinking about like the public blockchain and how the public blockchain can be leveraged, to do things at a global scale. But, your large corporations, oftentimes have multiple business units that don't necessarily like talk to one another. You would think that inside a large, organization, you would not require a trustless network. But indeed, depending on how large some of these things are, I just go back to my days, Motorola was one of my clients back in the day. This is in like early 2000s, multi-billion-dollar, company. I think their personal communication sector, PCS division, that was, I think that was a $4 billion company like by itself. And then, they had, I think 8 or 9 other business units. Each one of those business units had its own CEO, its own CIO, its own chief operating, it was its own, business by itself. They had a corporate umbrella, but the real power existed in the actual business unit. And so, in order for collaboration, to occur, I can imagine a situation where, in that kind of environment, you for sure could use, private blockchains to create consortia, even within, a single corporation, to create these trustless networks, to track resources and make sure, different value that was created accrued to the appropriate, party, within the broader, corporate umbrella. I hadn't thought about that before, but that you've got me thinking about that now. That deserves more thought.
That's right. Well, and I wonder if that's a follow-up too, which is just like kind of answering that question. I mean, I'm asking it because, some people I can imagine are thinking, all right, like what can I do to make my business better? They're asking a wide question and open to many answers. And one of, a way you would answer it is like, go get some smart people and bring them in here. And enough people I know are thinking that. So I'm going to launch Cio Advisor. So I'm going to send myself in there. I'm going to bring some of my friends and we'll help you from this perspective. We'll turn some of your IT kind of thoughts from, expense to investment. But others might just, some people already get something in their mind, right? Like I've got to implement XYZ. I need to, build this. I need to, and it's many things. It's not just this, but I know there's companies out there saying like, I need to be leveraging blockchain because that's going to help me be something more resilient, more future-proof, maybe more valuable, maybe drive more value to my end customers or my employees or my, stakeholders. And so, we just had like some really wide questions and not really specific answers. So maybe many people are asking that. So maybe that's something you could help, create
Yeah.
some content around and address.
No, for sure. So like, like I've got COVID on the brain, you probably have COVID on the brain. So like a lot of this conversation, my responses have been, with COVID at the forefront. But prior to COVID even coming here, there are certain businesses that are sort of, they're actually in the bullseye, whether they know it or not, for COVID to have, I'm not sorry, COVID, for blockchain as a technology to have very negative impact on their business, if they don't move. So this is kind of an innovator's dilemma, right? Like if you don't innovate, if you don't, eat yourself, you might have your lunch taken. And by that, I mean, blockchain as a technology, one of its primary uses, and you see this in the financial sector, is disintermediation, right? And so if your business relies on a business model where you are a trusted, intermediary, if you're a platform and you're a trusted intermediary between two parties, people can use blockchain to disintermediate you out of a business, right? And so, for instance, if you are a bank, and you stand as a trusted third party between, Walter sending Nick a payment. Blockchain tools exist to disintermediate you out of a business. Now, it might take a little while to catch on, right? And I think there's certain people who are motivated to not let that happen. But certainly, peer-to-peer payments, the way they happen now, like there may be a PayPal, and PayPal may take a transaction fee. If you're trying to pay a business, and that business wants to, accept your payment, they can set up Square or PayPal or something else, right? And those guys are going to take a transaction. The classic way to do that is for you to swipe your Visa or your MasterCard. And certainly, like as a consumer, you don't necessarily feel it. Maybe you feel it on the other side, but the vendor, they take an immediate, hit because they get charged for every transaction that gets processed. And there are blockchain technologies that allow that to happen with little to no transaction fees, right? And so don't think that Visa and MasterCard aren't aware of this, and they're working hard to figure out how to defend against it. And what I'm saying is there are other businesses, for instance, escrow companies, other types of business, and particularly title companies in real estate. These industries are ripe for disintermediation. And if they don't do something to defend against this coming wave of innovation based on blockchain, they're going to find themselves obviated with no customers.
Yeah. Does disintermediation, this is kind of bouncing around as we move to the close, but does disintermediation save the world, or is it just a new breed of companies that are more efficient and therefore better product, better service, cheaper, and now these extra resources at a macro level can be redeployed elsewhere into the economy or whatever?
Well, so here's the thing that's interesting about that. Value gets created, and value gets accrued or attributed, somewhere, right? So like, if somebody creates Facebook, right? Somebody did create Facebook. Typically, that corporation extracts a lot of the value from the transactions that happen between, the people and companies that use that platform, right? Same thing with Google. The idea for the pure, like, for blockchain purists or maximalists, these platforms will be created, for the betterment or the good of society. And so that there wouldn't be this extraction of that value, that the value would accrue to the people who use the platform as opposed to the platform owner. Now, I don't think we've seen, other than Bitcoin, because nobody owns Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is a platform, and the value, of Bitcoin accrues to the users of it, but there's no central authority that's basically extracting, value, out of everyone. That value is sort of distributed throughout the network. And so, I think time will tell, from a public blockchain perspective, if that sort of, these altruistic, sort of ideals, or these idealistic notions prevail, or if capitalistic sort of ideals prevail. But I think people are struggling with that right now, and we don't yet have the answers.
Yeah. Well, I said it being kind of a smart ass actually, because I was like, obviously money replaced barter or coins or something. And then we instead, like the concept of currency, you could say change the world, as opposed to it's all barter and I have to want what you want. Like now it's a way more efficient, system of commerce. And then, credit obviously totally changed, commerce, because there was no longer a physical thing. And I'm not a historian or an
Thank the
expert,
Medicis, the Medici family for those
yeah,
those banknotes.
that's right. Yeah. And so like, I'm just like, if this is just a better credit card or PayPal, that's more just like in the ether sphere, then like, that's cool. And that's like a huge deal, but it's like not really changing the world, but it could, but not really. So, but then as we talked, I was like, well, yeah, that is, one of those sort of purest promises is that value kind of accrues equitably across all of these ecosystems. So now I can just walk around like, because right now everyone everyone's a purveyor or everyone's a customer, like I'm either buying shit or I'm making something, instead of like kind of like more of a smoothing out, like, hey, I'm using this, I'm getting some value, I'm giving value, I'm getting value. I mean, can we like, what is life fully revolutionized where it does change the world, save the world? Because each of these eyeballs is equally value. Each of these inputs are equally valuable. And if you think about the global world, obviously a couple, bucks to one is like totally different than a couple bucks to another,
And that's where I think you're zeroing in on the short-term immediate impact, right? Because I've read a number of stories about, app developers who, they couldn't continue to support their app, or they couldn't, continue to sort of like, build their app, or they even backed away before they even built it, because their business model could not facilitate or absorb Apple's 30% app tax, from the App Store, right? So like, there's products out there that we could have had, available on our phones, but because of that, Apple app tax, companies just didn't even build them because it wasn't financially viable, for their business. And so in developing nations, right, like, can these small, sort of, sole proprietor, can they absorb the cost of Visa? Can they absorb the cost of Square transaction fees, to basically, use digital POSs? Probably not, right? And so that then becomes difficult. And so some of these places, I think the skids of commerce would be greased if they had tools that did allow them to do that. And I forgot the name of the company, but I think Stripe just acquired for $200 million, like some company in Ghana or Nigeria, that has a basically a digital payment, system, for over there. So, it's definitely something that, major players are investing in.
Yeah, Paystack. There you go.
Yeah,
Well, that's going to be another feature of this show, the newsread. Start coming soon. Let's wrap. So, but I was thinking like, well, even the clinical trial, right? If the trial or the experiment or something is designed right to where data is data, and it's not like segmented to, I need it from this sort of geographic population, and that's not all studies, right? Then, now all of a sudden we can run clinical trials and value can accrue to the trialee. Right. First of all, value does not accrue to the trialee now in anywhere. It's just sort of like you get to do it. And then first of all, I mean, this is fucked up too, because you either got the drug, because it's like, oh, I might get this experimental thing. It's great. Or you got the placebo. Right. So you did all this. You might even be getting fake, man. Yeah. So anyways, and I don't know how blockchain tracks that, but so, okay, well, let's break. I think, we covered a lot of ground, and I think this actually sets up for maybe a good teaser for round 2 about like all the different sort of like business of blockchain, things that it can save or fix or change from a huge perspective. And then how does that actually zero back down to something that's practical and implementable now? But yeah, we talked about kind of personal journey, broadening your skill set, to use the Challenger. Okay, the Challenger Sales, good book. It's a recommendation. Be strategic and not, an order taker was kind of a part of that, to, doing leadership stuff in the time of COVID. And I know I can speak kind of on your behalf and say, or advocate for the stuff you're doing, which is a great job. And, meeting with people from daily, lots of people weekly, from leadership to frontline leaders to the team, to having these sort of team rituals that are now digital on at least a weekly basis. And it's been really effective. And obviously the team is thankful for you in that regard. So, closing, we're ready to wrap. So I want to just say thank you for coming on. And if you've got any last sort of thoughts on the world, experiences, good books, any upcoming, well, actually, how about this? Any upcoming big life events happening for you?
The family's about to be expanded, so that's super exciting. In short order, actually, it's imminent. But yeah, no, this conversation was cool, man. Like it's kind of weird how it played out, because this is like one of our typical jam sessions anyway. Like, we're just rapping, having a good conversation. But just thanks for having me. And I co-sign that deeper dive blockchain conversation. That's going to be a good one. So I look forward to it.
All right, cool.